And so this study was relatively straightforward. It's more of a literature review, looking at the meaningful ways to promote intergroup contact, and looking at how we can encourage group contact, as well as what factors play a role in the occurrence or lack thereof of intergroup contact. And so the authors evaluated and discussed the research and studies in this field, and they looked at the information as it pertained to micro level, meso level, and macro level. And the different factors here were: micro level, they were looking at the motivations for intergroup contact and relational self-expansion and confidence in contact. At the meso level, they were looking at intragroup processes and history of severe and violent intergroup conflict. And at the macro level, they were looking at societal norms. And they looked at these different studies and to draw conclusions about the intergroup contact, and not only what its benefits are, but how we can help achieve them. And the findings of the study were that many people tend to avoid intergroup contact despite contact opportunities. And so to help further intergroup contact and the benefits that it provides is that you can, it can be through these methods: coordinating contact-based interventions that best help meet individuals' needs, finding ways to let people witness intergroup contact, and encouraging support within an in-group for intergroup contact, taking into account the critical components that are necessary for intergroup contact following violence, and instead looking for the common interests and beliefs, implementing social policies that will encourage and promote intergroup contact, and adjusting social norms. And so those are some of the ways that that we as peace builders can help further intergroup contact efforts. And the other thing they mentioned in the study in terms of that first bullet point, with many people tend to avoid or instigate intergroup contact despite contact opportunities. It was across the board in terms of why people instigate and why people avoid intergroup contact. The reason for that one person may avoid intergroup contact for one person might be a reason for another person to instigate it. And so there wasn't a common consensus of this is why intergroup contact does or does not happen, which makes sense considering just individuality. But the key takeaway from the study was just that intergroup contact is a great way to promote a peaceful society, reduce discrimination, and can lead to many other benefits. But it doesn't magically happen. So it's critical that we continue to research ways to encourage intergroup contact, to remove the barriers to it, and adjust our social policies and norms to promote it. So relatively straightforward, simple literature review, and I'm interested to see what you all think.
Yeah, I think this kind of piggybacks nicely on what we were talking about in the last couple studies.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially about how it needs, I like that in the key takeaway, it's like, it doesn't happen magically. So it needs to be structured, and there needs to be a foundation to build off of this intergroup contact. So
right.
It aligns, Jeremy, with exactly what you were saying in response to the last study.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if it would help. I think it helps me. I mean, I wonder if it helped people in general to kind of be more aware of why they avoid other group members, or generally other people that hold belief systems that may in some way be perceived to threaten their own belief systems, or their own, the sacredness of their own belief systems. You know, and it gets back to like sort of that very basic psychological theory about trust and predictability. How do I create an environment that feels safe for me? I create routines and rituals and belief systems that like sort of make this map of the world and how it works, and then I feel safe and comfortable because I can predict what's going to happen. And the minute I introduce new things into it, it gets a little scary. And sometimes that could feel fun, be adventurous, and like do new stuff because it's adventurous. It's a little bit scary. But things that really threaten a deep belief system, like introducing other people that hold different types of beliefs or backgrounds or experiences that I don't understand, all of a sudden put a wrench in that predictability model. And so it makes me feel very unsafe. So I mean, I don't know if like helping people go, hey, you're avoiding or not in contact with these other types of people or other people because, potentially because it feels like threatening to your system of beliefs or way of life or something. And let's see if we can get out of that. Let's see if we can break the perception of that threat.
Yeah, I think it's threat, but also fear. Like what was arising for me reading that and hearing you speak is I facilitated these circles, right? Book circles on learning about, not learning about, but basically exploring and building awareness on race relations in the US. And it was an all-white female group who, when we did start talking about like key takeaway, like how to interact with others and have friends that are different than you, it wasn't so much as a threat that a lot of women talked about, but more of a fear of like either doing something wrong, saying something wrong, not knowing how to interact. Like, so there's all these fears.
Oh yeah.
And those can come from so many different, factors of one's experience in their life. So how do we kind of break those fears to?
That's a great question. I think that speaks to like, if we're going to promote contact between people of different groups or backgrounds or whatever, to do it in a very conscious, deliberate way of creating a safe space where you are allowed to be yourself, be authentic, ask questions, do things, and you're not going to be jumped on for making a mistake. That this is actually like a deliberate, safe place to explore, and it's okay to ask things that may feel weird to other people, and like people aren't going to jump on you. Right? I mean that, because that would be different for me if I went into this. I was in this group. I went one time to this group, and the topic of the group was I think it was like basically the same thing, race relations in the U.S. And it was all kinds of people. It was all men. It was a men's group. It was all men from different backgrounds, ethnicities, race, And I went in there, and I was very curious because I wanted to learn about different people's experiences, And so I asked a question. Like the group started, and they said, "Okay, does anybody have any questions, for anyone?" And I asked a question, and immediately this is my first time in the group. Everybody else knew each other, and like I asked a question and immediately I was like jumped on for even asking the question. And like there was a 30-minute discussion that unfolded about why my question was offensive, and all I asked was, and I guess I didn't understand the context of the group, because all I asked was, can you tell me a little bit about your experience in the past with feeling discriminated against? That was my question, and it was like apparently a very I don't know, some sort of question that was like offensive or something. So anyway, the point of that is the circle is not set up in a safe way where it was like you're allowed to ask questions and you're not going to be jumped on or shamed for asking your question. And that's why I think the problem exists sometimes with these contact groups is like, I am afraid I'm going to make a mistake, ask the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, because then I'll be jumped on, I'll be looked at a certain way and all this stuff. And it's like, that doesn't help, So anyway, that's my example of the safe space, proposal.
Yeah, I think again, just back to generally speaking, a foundation has to be laid out, right? I mean, even there's a lot of intergroup interfaith organizations out there that lay a foundation so that people that come to are part of these organizations or these meet and greets, things like that. They're aware that they're going to be surrounded by different beliefs and different religions, different groups.
Yeah.
And there's like some protocols in play. There's some norms that are usually, articulated before starting to make sure that it's a safe space or whatnot. Like, so as long as you have those things kind of to lay down that foundation.
The expectations have to be set about what this space is about. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Which is what our moving from identity to humanity training is going to do.
Right. And super important, because I experienced it myself. If you're walking into an echo chamber and everybody there holds the same belief, and if you bring in a different type of belief, they're going to jump on you. If you don't know that going ahead, it feels like an emotionally dangerous place to be. So what is the space you want to create? Is it an echo chamber, or is it a place where everyone's beliefs and thoughts and questions can be considered and put into the mix in a safe way?
Yeah, I feel like it depends on I think you're right. I think if you're looking for a group, say, to discuss different opinions and different ideas and what race relations looks like in the US and what it can look like, then, I think it depends as well. If you have, like, I think of almost a responsibility, I think, on white people, if you look at race relations, like to help educate to some degree other white people, just because, I think white people can understand the experience of why you feel frustrated with race relations, which is nothing in comparison to the discrimination that I imagine a lot of people of color experience. But I imagine, like, it seems like to me in that group that you were in, Jeremy, it seems like that was more of a, like, I know that bringing up, at least what I've heard and what I've experienced with friends and read about is, bringing up past experiences of discrimination and trauma, especially racially, it brings back the racial trauma. It's a re-experience of the trauma that was had, and so it can be more painful for people in the group. But I can see how for you in the case of not knowing that coming, maybe that group is more of a space where, that safety is needed for those people who have, who've had really horrible experiences. And so I all that said, I agree. I think, there needs to be some sort of
expectations set.
I think also maybe with some flexibility and understanding the humanity of the matter too, because, a lot of times I imagine as humans, I think a lot of times we don't know when our past experiences are going to be. Oh, did I break up again?
You're good. We hear you.
Okay, cool. Did I pause in some sort of face or something?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
You're like
Thanks. That's great.
It was great.
Thanks. But yeah. That's all I was going. That's all I was saying. But I think it's.
I like the idea of the identity of humanity. I'm just like really setting the stage, what this space is going to be, what we're going to be doing here, and what's okay and what's not okay. Here's some of the ground rules. Because that for me, like, that was not, in that particular example I gave, that was not done. And my understanding of what the group was apparently was not in line with what the group was. It was explained to me in a way that was not clear, and it was so I think us setting the stage for those kinds of groups is going to be really key.
Absolutely.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I don't know, like, the specifications of what they told you, like, before going in, obviously, but I know for me personally, like, so kind of to Noah's earlier point, like, when all the protests were happening in Atlanta this summer, a bunch of my white friends or non-Black friends would message me and be like, hey, what can I do to, like, be an advocate? How can I address my own privilege and the ways in which I subconsciously enable, like, racism or whatever? And I, like, am fine with that question. When people are like, oh, well, how did you experience X, Y, and Z? I'm perfectly fine answering that question, because, like, the fact that you're coming to me, particularly when I feel like it's so polarized these days, the fact that someone feels comfortable coming to me and just being like, listen, I know I'm supposed to know, but I don't, like, can you just educate me? I take that as an opportunity to educate, as opposed to, like, being annoyed, because then you kind of close the door on that conversation. But I do know putting the burden of that emotional work on the person who's been traumatized can also be a very hard experience. And so perhaps that's why some people reacted like the way they did to that question. Again, I wasn't there, I don't know. And I also do agree with Sarah's point and everyone's point that, like, if you're going to have a conversation about that, I think you do need to set some standards of, like, okay, if we're going to have a conversation, then all questions and all statements need to be asked. Otherwise, we're not really doing a service to the topic itself. But I do know also, like, there were a lot of people, like, on Twitter or whatever that were like, if you're white, don't ask your Black friends how you can help disassemble racism, like, do your own research. And to Sarah's earlier point, I think there's room for both truths. I don't think it's an either or. Like, I think, yes, you have an obligation to examine your own role in white supremacy, and it's also okay to ask your friends, like, what they can do. So yeah, that's kind of like my 2 cents. I think just to, like, contextualize perhaps why that response happened, not to, like, you know, justify it or say that I don't agree that there should be protocols. Because I think when you shut a question down like that, you kind of close the door on conversations, and now you don't know the answer to the question. So
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think that's probably what happened. But the problem was I think the name of the group was something along the lines of experiences of discrimination or something like that. And like what was explained to me by the person that invited me into it was, this is a group where people talk about their experiences with, I asked about, could you tell me what your experiences were? I was like, I thought that was the whole point of the group, you know? So
hey.
Yeah, so it was just a misalignment of expectations.
Yeah, there seems to have been a miscommunication somewhere in there between. can't speak luckily, to that.
Yeah, what's funny is luckily when I was in that and people were kind of like jumping on me for asking the question, the person who I knew well, who had invited me into the group, he stepped in at some point and said, guys, everybody. He's like, I want to take the blame here because I did not properly tell Jeremy like what to expect, and I didn't give him the rule. I didn't give him like the sort of what this is about and all this stuff. And so he kind of took over and took some responsibility.
I'm curious, what were their criticisms on your question?
The one that I remember the most, the first person that responded was something along the lines of something like very similar to what you asked, is like basically when you ask me that question, now you're putting the burden on me to, like, I have to answer you, and if I don't answer you, then I look like, I look like the jerk who doesn't want to answer you, or something like that, where it's like, so I was just confused because I was like, but I thought that was what we were talking about. I thought that was the whole point of the group, is for us to all kind of talk about different experiences that we had. How do I learn?
I think this just reminds me, just in my past experience working with trauma and refugees and having to ask their stories, like through formal interviews where I had to ask very difficult questions and get them to literally re-traumatize themselves, right? And it was the most uncomfortable thing ever. But leading, it was like, because I posed the question. I asked the question, right, and put that, like, the spotlight on them. Whereas if they turned their own spotlight on and had like the microphone in their hand, it would be probably a different experience for them, like, because you put the spotlight on one versus letting them openly speak the way. I'm just thinking maybe that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Because what I realized was so I was new to the group, I've never been there, and I think the person who's like sort of the facilitator of the group said, does anybody have anything they want to say or something like that? And so no one was saying anything. So I kind of just threw my hat, in the circle, and just thought, oh, I'll try it out. And what I'm used to is in group circles, men's groups and stuff, which I've been in for a long time. We don't necessarily, we don't lecture or talk. We ask questions of each other. That's how we help each other get to each other's truths. Now, that's a coaching circle. That's what I'm used to. So instead of me coming out and talking about myself, my first inclination was to ask a question. What I realized after that was the rest of the circle, people weren't asking each other questions. They were just talking about whatever they're experiencing. And I was like, oh, okay. I did not understand that was the protocol. I thought this was just, we ask each other questions and we, that kind of stuff. So it was a total
goes to show how much, how important the foundation laying and like the structure building, just like all of the research that we talked about today. I feel like it was highlighting that. It was highlighting how there needs to be like a structure in place for things to really happen in a constructive way.
Yeah, exactly. It's like this group is a group where we're going to talk, we're going to ask questions from each other, or this group is a group where we're going to talk about our own experiences and volunteer to talk about your own experience. That would have been very helpful, right? As a foundation. So I think you're right. Having those sort of ground rules and setting a foundation would be good.
Yeah. It's a very interesting story. Quite entertained by that because it just reminds me of my own experiences. It's very funny.
Yeah.
And Alyssa, thank you for sharing too, just like your perspective on it, because I think that it's interesting to hear, right? I've also heard from different people of color, like a very opposing.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of takes. A lot of people don't mind. A lot of people find it really offensive that you would ask. To Sarah's point, I think it's also like, if you ask me now, I'm responding because you asked me, not because I wanted to tell the story. Which is like exactly a very minor nuance. To me, when it comes to race relations, at the very least, I'm a pretty open book. I to me, it's like another day, another dollar, so I don't really mind talking about it. But some people have really, really traumatizing experiences, and thank God I have not had one as of yet. But I definitely, that's an interesting story. I think a lot of that just comes down to like also group norms. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
To end on like a highlight here, I know we're over our time, but I think it's just so amazing that we're having conversations like that, right? That we're talking about these taboo topics. We're having intergroup dialogues, right? And this has been going on now, I mean, with like, I don't know, 10 plus years with the rise of globalization and just the free movement of people. Like we're talking about this stuff more. It's a new industry. It's a new topic of conversation, not just race relations in the US, but just intergroup dialogue in general. 50 years ago, it was unheard of because no one left where they were, kind of thing, So it's just amazing that we're able to have these types of conversations.